Hello and welcome to the INDX webinar series. I'm Karen Almond, Director of Fashion and Toys at AIS. For those of you who are new to AIS, we're Associated Independent Stores and we're the leading independent buying group for home and fashion in the UK and Ireland. We have a buying throughput of around £500 million from more than 300 retail store members, including department stores, garden centres and specialist stores, for example, sports stores. We work exclusively with independents which range from single stores to regional chains, with a combined retail turnover of over £2 billion. We have around 130 staff in specialist buying and support functions, and we're centrally located in the Midlands at Cranmore Park, where our head office doubles as an impressive conference and exhibition centre, which would normally be buzzing at this time of year with industry shows. But in the absence of live shows, we wanted to ensure that we continue to engage with our store members in a way where we can provide relevant and useful information in the run-up to retail reopening in April and May. So we're delighted to be introducing a series of live industry-focused webinars aimed at independent retail businesses. And I know we've got some of our colleagues also joining the sessions today, so welcome to everybody. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for giving up their time for these sessions. And we have an exciting group of expert speakers covering topics from social media skills to customer engagement. There'll be no corporate jargon, just interesting content that I hope you'll find very useful. If you do want to ask any questions, there is a chat icon at the top right-hand corner of your screen. It's a little speech bubble with a question mark, so you can type any questions in there. I'm delighted to introduce Andrew Goodacre, who's the Chief Executive of British Independent Retailers Association, or BIRA, who's going to talk to us about independent retail in COVID times. Andrew has been the CEO for BIRA since September 2018, having previously spent many years in the hospitality industry. BIRA represents more than 4,000 independent retailers throughout the UK, ranging from a small hardware shop to an independent department store. Andrew believes that independents are at the heart of every good high street and will continue to make a valuable contribution to their local economies and local communities. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Andrew now.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. And Karen, thank you very much for that introduction. So yes, I've been with BIRA for just over 2.5 years. And it's been nothing but interesting, in fairness, and especially the last 12 months, as probably interesting doesn't do it justice. It's been an amazing 12-month period, and we're still not through the current lockdown period. So retail is dynamic, always has been, and will continue to be so in the future, I'm sure, whether it's large or small. And as Karen says, BIRA is about the independent retailer, mainly large, the smaller stores. Most of our members are single shop members. But they're independent, they're family owned, they're privately owned, and many of them find themselves heavily involved with local communities and making the local economy work, making the communities work, and bringing people together as a mindset. We are mainly non-food in there, so we deal with commodity retailing, although over the last few years you've seen more what people might call service retailers, with hairdressers, barbers, etc. coming to join us. So it's very mixed, and that gives us a great insight into the retail sector. What I'm going to talk about is some of the work BIRA has been doing for members, for independent retail in general, some of the changes we've seen happen in the last few months, again from a small retail perspective, and then just some thoughts on looking ahead and some of the challenges in the future as well. So I'll just share my screens. Excellent. So hopefully you should now be seeing something that says campaigns, COVID and change. And as the next slide will say, BIRA is about supporting independent retailers in two ways. We do services, the traditional services of a legal helpline, insurance, credit card processing, etc. Hopefully best deals for members. And then we do campaigns and lobbying, a kind of a service in a way, but often the hidden service. And this is an area we've been focused on more so during my time, but especially in the last 12 months. And here we work with other associations, the industry bodies. We are members in our own rights of the Retail Sector Council, which is a body of small and large retail associations working with the Department for Business and the Business Minister to look at strategies and developments within retail in general and how to move retail forwards. We have regular contact with ministers, whether it's BEIS, Treasury, DEFRA, MHCLGs, the Ministry of Housing, Community Local Government, civil servants and individual MPs. And quite a lot of my time is spent talking to these people. I find that civil servants are probably the most important within this because ministers come and go, MPs come and go to an extent. Civil servants tend to be consistent and they're responsible, irrespective of which party is in control, for implementing policy as determined by that party. So we have really good relationships and developed those over the last few years with senior civil servants in those key departments. In terms of the specific campaigns or lobbying that we've been focused on, I think it comes into three areas over the last 12 months. One is business rates, which ever since I joined the world of independent retail has been the big topic from a retail business perspective. The other one is COVID support, which we didn't know existed until these last 12-month period. And then there's the wider PR, publicity and media coverage that really underpins much of what we do from a campaign lobbying perspective. So business rates, a bit of a background, and then we'll talk a bit more about what to expect in the future, hopefully. So I joined in 2018. At that time, there was the beginning of a campaign by my predecessor that we then implemented and launched in October of that year. And we embraced and engaged MPs and key departments, the Treasury mainly, in fairness, because business rates is determined by Treasury. And we were asking for a reduction in the rates for smaller retailers by introducing a form of an allowance. That in the same way as you had income tax allowances, is that the first £11,000 of income tax is tax-free. What we were saying was that the first £25,000 of business rates should be rates-free and do away with all the other reliefs that currently exist. So we presented this and it got good traction, in fairness. And whilst we didn't get everything we asked for, what we saw in the budget of that year, of 2018, was an announcement about something called a retail discount that was launched then in April 2019. And initially this introduced a 50% retail discount for those businesses below £51,000 rateable value. Again, it didn't quite go far enough, but it was a beginning of change in the business rate system that is long overdue. That changed again in the last 12 months, or in March last year, just as we started the pandemic crisis and the government response to it. It was clear that the business rates were going to be a key element of the support offered by government. And so they did away with a discount, which they had increased at that point, in fairness. They were going to offer a much larger discount, but they did away with business rates overall. And so all retail and hospitality businesses were exempt from business rates for a full year. And that's still the case. So that was a massive victory for retail. We were part of it. I'm not going to say that we were the sole perpetrators and cause of such a change. It was mainly driven by the reality that the government needed to support retail businesses that were going to be closed. So removing business rates was very welcome. And then on from there, in the past 6 months, we've seen two important consultations take place. One was about the most immediate support required for businesses once the business rates holiday is finished. And the second one was about a wider rates reform coming along in the autumn. So we made good contributions to this consultation. We spoke in person with business ministers, with the Treasury officials. And what we've seen in the budget being announced was partly from there with reduced rates. And if you're not sure, I'm sure you did see it announced that the holidays have been extended for a further 3 months, and then 33% or a third of your rates will be payable thereafter. In effect, it means that businesses will pay 25% of their rateable value in the year 21-22. For some of you, the larger businesses and certainly AIS customers fall in that category, that's still quite a chunk of money to find, and we are well aware of that. And the frustration is with that announcement by the Chancellor is, we know in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, they extended the rates holiday by a further 12 months. So we think the English government could have gone further, and we've sought clarification on why they haven't, but at least we've got a 75% reduction on business rates to look forward to, which is not ideal, but it helps. And it does set the platform for what we're looking forward to in the autumn, with a wider announcement on business rates from the government. I've not met anyone in business, I've not met anyone in government or in officials who feels that business rates is really fit for purpose at this moment in time. That changing it is a challenge because of the income it generates, the certainty around that income, and how do you replace it from other sources. We were expecting something around online taxing and the digital companies in the budget. We suspect it was left out on purpose because there'll be an announcement in the autumn this year. But it's clear that from our point of view, taxation should follow wealth, and the wealth within retailing has gone online. And in a way, the government has to balance its books by taxing more of the online retailers, levelling the playing field, the business playing field, so to speak, and making in-store retailing far more competitive. So we look forward to a rates reform coming along in the autumn. In terms of COVID, what else happened? We've been campaigning hard for furlough extensions. They were confirmed in the budget at the beginning of this month. Grants, there's been a total of almost £40,000 available to businesses in the form of grants. Again, I think at times that could have been more, but it's been made available. We think the distribution could have been easier and better, but we've got there, and the government's been listening in that respect. The rent moratorium, we've been working with other associations, and that only last week that was announced as being extended till the middle of June, to the end of June. So this is really protecting people who owe rent to their landlord, preventing the landlord from taking legal action. And it's important, however, between now and when this moratorium runs out, and I don't think it will be extended again, I'll be honest, then if there is rent debt in place, that the tenant and the landlord have to find a way forward. They have to find a way of reaching an agreement to address that, because otherwise landlords will be free to take legal action. I believe at some point this year, we can't, that moratorium cannot last forever. It's been in place for more than a year now. The operating guidelines are the guidelines that we talk about in terms of what you need to do to be open as a retailer. And it's really important. Many of you will be closed at the moment, but it's really, really important that when you look forward to reopening in April, on April the 12th, that you've got everything in place and you refresh everything that you did in June last year after the first lockdown and the reopening then. And that includes behind the scenes in terms of risk assessments, as well as making sure that there's plenty of signage, social distancing, hand sanitizer, etc., available for the general public. And government communications, we've been playing a heavy part in making sure that the government is reassuring the public about the safety of shopping, and also helping us implement things such as the wearing and mandatory wearing of face coverings. And again, if you've been closed during the last 3.5 months, just a word of caution about face coverings, because the government's asked retailers that have stayed open, the essential retailers, to be more proactive in enforcing the face covering rules. It's caused more flashpoints with a significant increase in verbal abuse on retail staff and owners, and even physical abuse as well. So yes, we need to implement the safety protocols, and yes, it requires government communication and consumer compliance, but it is an increasing amount of flashpoint, and face coverings will still be required when you reopen. So it's one worth rebriefing your employees about. PR, this bit that underpins everything we've been saying to government, and we've been very vocal and received a huge amount of coverage, whether it's in the physical press, the written press, online, social media, radio and TV. And most importantly, we've used our members to get the message across. Media loves when they can hear it from the coalface, and we now have several members who represented, including IAS members, and talked about their challenges, talked about their story during lockdown, talked about their challenge of running a business in this most unusual and unique times. And that really helps, establish our credibility, our authority, and the constructive nature of what we've been saying. And I think that's why, as a body now, as a representative association for retailers, we're getting more contact and more constructive contact with the government bodies and the civil servants who want to know more about what BIRA has to say and the role independent retail can play when we start to look about rebuilding this economy. And we will continue to push that and make that happen. It's such an important part of what we do. And in many ways, it's a hidden part of what we do, but it's so important there. So the campaigning, the PR has been fantastic from that perspective. The other side of what BIRA does is about services, and there I think we fall into two categories. One is that we offer protection, and I mentioned the legal helpline, which is our most popular service. There's insurance, there's other aspects as well, but we've also been facilitating change, and this is really important that we as an association recognise that the world of retail is changing, and we've seen some interesting changes caused by the pandemic. I think there's two major society changes that have occurred. One is the accelerated growth of internet shopping from a non-food basis. Pre-pandemic, so a year ago, it was about 20% of all retail sales. Last year, it reached as high as 50%. And I think at the moment, online shopping accounts for between 40 and 45% of non-food retail sales in the UK. And that's a significant shift. It doubled the amount that its penetration of the market. And you will have seen that in your own operations. In some sectors more than others, and certainly clothing has been the most affected sector by COVID-19 for many reasons. And it will probably take longest to recover as a result of that. So what we've been doing is asking ourselves, right, how do we help our members facilitate the change that they need to make? What is it we need to do as a credible business association for our members? And in this respect, the necessity has been the mother of invention. So part of what we've done has been driven by members coming to us and saying, can you help us with this? And part of it has been done because we've been forced to think differently ourselves. And move away from simply protecting the best interests of our members to also helping them develop and change in that way. And what we have seen change is the implementation of safety protocols. And so we were very good at making sure that independent retailers had available the appropriate notices, the appropriate communications, the appropriate guidance readily available, whether it's on our website or sent via an email, sent through our newsletters, and really made sure that they were on top of that area, because getting open and staying open are so crucial. It's an obvious thing to say, but we've got to make it stick this time as well. We've had that new and more focus on digital retailing. And in this respect, one of the things we do is introduce members to partner businesses and partner services that can help our members do it. So we've got really good partners for social media presence. We've got really good partnerships for developing websites and improving websites. And those are crucial because we know that more people are shopping online, and we know that all businesses will need a better website presence. Transactional websites, they've increased from 60% of all our members had a transactional website before. Now it's up to 85%. So we've seen a significant shift in member actions in that way. The social media, I think lots of people had a Twitter account maybe, or some presence on Facebook. Now it's very proactive. And again, it's working with partnerships or learning and organising information, providing information to help people make the most of that opportunity. What has been seen as a threat in the past is now got to be seen as an opportunity to make work. We've helped people understand click and collect, and that's been another change, significant change. So having your shop closed does not always mean that you're closed for business, full stop. And what we have seen, lots of retailers really say to themselves, well, if people can't come to me, maybe I'll go to them. And we've seen deliveries, and we've seen click and collect, and we've seen this ability to engage with a local community and make it happen. And that's really important, that engagement with local community, because the two big changes, one is internet shopping, the other big society change is where people work. And many people like myself at the moment, working from home, spending more time in their local area where they live, and therefore just naturally spending more time in the local shops and buying locally. All the research that I've seen done by independent people, whether it's Starling Bank, whether it's Visa, are saying that people want to shop more locally. They want to support the independent business where they can. So there's a real opportunity here to connect, enable people to find you, enable people to realize what services and what products you have available, and really meet their needs and match it. And we think that trend of working from home, while there'll be some drift back to offices and in city centres, it's unlikely that'll be a permanent shift, and people will work far more flexibly and will continue to spend more time in their local area. And that's good news for independents. There's better use of data. And again, this is crucial. This is still early days, but in many ways, what the large internet companies do really, really well is manage data. They really understand their customers. They really know their customers. They've got all this information they've captured through their website. And again, we are trying to find the best partners that will help our members manage their data in a similar way. Understanding your customers, knowing your customers means you can personalize your message, means you can really think about what is it they're looking for, and you can see what they're looking for when they visit your website. And it's about using that information to reach out to them and generate business and connections that way. So better use of data we've seen, but that has to continue. And then I've talked about connecting with communities and customers. That's mainly been through social media, and some of the examples we've seen are anything from a fashion boutique doing a fashion show via Zoom, Teams or Facebook, to virtual wine tasting. Creativity has been fantastic, resilience has been fantastic, and we've seen and tried to support those initiatives taking place. In terms of looking ahead, we can look ahead to reopening, and hopefully with a vaccine program rolling out as it is, then hopefully it'll be a permanent reopening and we won't face this prospect of lockdown again. But there are other issues coming along or that are with us that you need to think about as well, and other areas in which we as an association are trying to help independent business come to terms with. So we've got a free trade agreement that started on the 1st of January. And if any of you are unaware of this, and I'm sure you all are or should be, about the changes to rules of origin. Not an easy area to understand. It does look like tariffs, and it does mean tariffs are coming in and already there if you started importing from Europe. And this means extra costs to the businesses. Not always possible to pass those extra costs on to the customers. So there's lots of information, and we are directing people and working with government to make sure the information is readily available, mainly through government websites, but in an easy to understand format. So if you're unsure, there's a whole section called transition that's been made available by the government. We've worked with the government to create user-friendly, easy to understand guides. Rules of origin is a complex area as it stands, but they're trying to break it down. The bottom line is it makes imports from Europe that were tariff-free in December, they incur tariffs in January onwards. And either people will look at different supply chains, or there'll be hopefully some kind of agreement with the supplier to mitigate some of the impact of that. We don't anticipate it to change in the near future. The Europe's likely to dig its heels in, unless European companies recognise that it's damaging their business and their export business, and they put pressure on their own governments to review it. But we don't expect that anytime soon. So we are living with tariffs, and that's not great news. And we are working with the government to try to mitigate it. Net zero, reducing your carbon footprint, circular economy, all phrases about sustainable. And sustainable retailing was a growth area pre-pandemic and will continue to be. And I know this topic's been covered already today by Sea Salt talking about what they're doing. And I think even at a local level, we've got lots of retailers who are ethically sourcing their products, who are presenting themselves as ethical retailers and doing very well as a result, creating a niche market, making it work, whether it's clothing, whether it's toys, whether it's food. And there's no doubt that Net Zero will be part of that. As an association, we're involved with 2 projects in this area. One is we're working with some consultants and a couple of other bodies, and again from the Retail Sector Council, which I mentioned earlier, to create something called a green street, a trial of a green street. What would it look like? How does it feel? What should a green high street include and do? And there's funding being made available for this, and we're really excited to be involved with that. And on the other side, there's a project that the government's got simply about helping small businesses reduce their carbon footprint. And again, we're feeding in from a retail perspective and hoping to make sure that that information is easily understood by all of you. And then the third element to look ahead to is an economic recovery. Some interesting statistics. I think the Chancellor was saying that the official or the Office for Budget Responsibility is indicated the recovery could come quicker than we think, or the bounce back will be sharper than we think. The Bank of England only the other week announced that there was £125 billion extra in savings accounts, and they expected cautiously that 5% or 10% of that would be spent as part of this pent-up demand that we hope will reoccur. So there is optimism about the economy. At the same time, we know that that it's going to be very much a split recovery, because people most affected are low-paid workers, whether it be in hospitality, even in retail. They're the ones who have lost their jobs or been most affected. So we expect a kind of a split recovery, but it looks like there'll be pent-up demand, and it's about being ready to recover and make the most of that demand. I'm not convinced footfall will recover to its 2019 levels until everyone is vaccinated and has confidence in the vaccination working and reducing the spread and reducing the number of variants that we might see. But it will build up, and I think most importantly that the economy will only recover if we can keep businesses open, and we all play a role in that in terms of making sure the businesses are safe and operating in accordance with the rules. So there's a role for everyone in this, but I think the economic recovery will be a bounce, drop down again, and then build up from there. And no doubt a tough time for retail, but the one thing I've seen in the last 12 months is fantastic resilience from lots of retail, and often far more resilient than the large chains we've seen go to the wall. Debenhams, Arcadia Group. The independent side seems to be a bit more resilient at this moment in time. Okay, I've covered a lot there. Hopefully I've generated some interest and some questions. BIRA covers a wide range of topics, as you can see, all the way from dealing with government ministers to helping members become digitally stronger or with a reduced carbon footprint. It's a great role. I'm privileged to be doing this job. I'm privileged to be working with independent retailers, and there's a lot more that we want to do and can do, and a lot more challenges will lie ahead. The one thing I can reassure anyone who's a member who's part of this call or not a member, and is that we will work irrespective. We will try to make sure that independent retail has its voice and its presence, and is very much, as I've said as Jane said about the introduction, every great high street has independent stores at the heart of it, and that's got to be the message we get across as governments look to rebuild their high streets in the future. So that's my bit, and I'll deal with any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. That was really interesting. Got some questions that have come in. As a brick and mortar retailer, is a transactional website and everything that goes with it worth the investment?
I think it's certainly worth considering. I've got to be honest, with lots of our members, and talking with experts outside of our membership to support our members, we thought that their most important investment would be in really good social media, because it's about presence and it's about being found. The one thing you will discover with online retailing is that it's far more competitive than a high street, and there's far more choice. you are dominated by large companies and absolute expert. I mean, as much as I may dislike Amazon, there's a grudging respect for what they do and how they do it. And matching them will be almost impossible from a small business perspective. So I think you need a website. I think it will need to be transactional. In terms of investment, I would always put more into your social media presence and e-presence in order to connect with local communities, and look at smart technology that helps people find you and where you are. People tend to search by product as opposed to shop online. So if I'm looking for a blue shirt, I might just put blue shirt in, or I might think of a favorite shop, but normally I want to find out what's available locally. And I think that's what people need to think about is how do you get your presence, your stock, your offers in the faces of your customers. Social media does it, Facebook does it, and the most successful transitions I've seen and spoken to and understood are those that have used social media to support their website, but it's really been driven by their presence and ability to communicate digitally with their existing customers and new customers.
Yeah, you're reminding me of we did a members call a few months ago, and one of the members was saying that when they use social media, if they're going for the hard sell, it's not that effective. But when they have members of their family maybe modeling some clothes, just going about their sort of everyday business, then they get quite a lot of traction, because they're sort of, I guess they're involving it into their lifestyle, and they're very much demonstrating they're a family business.
Yes, and I think when a smaller retailer has a real advantage over the large chain in this respect is exactly where they have advantage on the high street. It's that uniqueness, and it's that personal touch about it. It is that family feel. Now, the challenge you've got is moving your personality into the digital world. And that's incredibly difficult through a two-dimensional website. Now, what you can do is exactly what that example shows, and what we've got plenty of examples in that way, where people have taken their personality, and what social media does is allow you to express yourself much better, whether it's visible in the form of a video, or even written in the form of a tweet, or sharing a post and an image, and sharing images within your shop. But you're sharing your personality. And that is the appeal of independent retail to many customers, is that personality, because you're offering something different. And it's really hard to do that through a website. It's much easier to do it through social media. It's still a challenge, but it's a better option.
Okay, thank you. Will there be any more government investment, or are you lobbying to get people back, going into physical shops and using their local high street?
Yeah, there's a definite investment from the government. They have pledged £1 billion now to their high street fund, and I think there are something like 20-25 cities and towns who have been successfully bid for some of that money, and we'll see some of that money coming back, and it's all geared towards repurposing a high street and hopefully making sure the city centres, town centres are places people want to visit in the future. We are currently working with a PR company to see if we can't persuade the government to do something for retail along the lines of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So last year, when hospitality opened up, we were all enjoying discounted food offers. And that were really well taken up and helped bring people back footfall-wise into those shops and businesses, or into those restaurants and businesses. We've started to ask the government questions: could we do that for retail, especially independent retail, and bring people back onto the high street and into the shops? We will get some pushback, because there's a feeling that even the Eat Out to Help Out scheme wasn't good for business. Did it crowd businesses? Was social distancing truly possible? And I think their safety is paramount, because they don't want to face another lockdown. But I think the government's certainly listening at this moment in time to ideas like that. They recognise the need to to accelerate the economy. Whilst people have got money saved, that's not to say that they're going to spend it. And as I say, even the Bank of England, they're only saying that between 5 or 10% of the 125 billion will be spent. So there has to be a way of helping people feel comfortable about spending some more of that money, whether it's on the high street, in leisure pursuits, whatever the case may be. Hospitality, we all need that money to be spent for the high streets to recover.
Okay, thank you. I'm just touching on the free trade agreement. You mentioned that some of the brands and suppliers who are based in Europe are absorbing some of the costs post-Brexit. But I think what we've been finding here, so this is really a question from me, is that I think people have offered to help out in spring, summer, because obviously it's a sort of bit of a shock to the system. But I think by the time we get to autumn, winter and beyond, we're finding that those prices are going to be loaded onto the cost price, really. And I think inevitably the cost is going to have to be passed on to the customer. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, we've been working with mainly clothing retailers, in fairness, because they're the ones most affected by this at this moment in time. So we have heard of suppliers splitting the tariff 50-50 maybe, but it's not permanent. It is a temporary fix to maintain the supply chain. And I generally think that the only way to get it changed in terms of the way the rules are applied will be to get support within Europe for the rules to be changed. If European suppliers start to see their order book decline because British retailers, large and small, are changing their supply chains and bypassing Europe and going straight to the actual originating country, then that may well provoke some of that demand from Europe to review these rules. I just don't think it'll happen that quickly, and I'm not sure that independent retailers have, and even your buying group has the power to switch supply chains that quickly either. So it's pain. Will you be able, I think in some product areas you might find it possible to pass the cost on to the consumer. A larger ticket item, you may see a 10% increase on the price of that being bearable by the consumer. I think in terms of clothing, again, I think if you increase some of these items by 15%, you go from just for easy maths, a £50 pair of trousers to something that's going to cost £57.50 because of the tariffs. That may be a tipping point for some customers. I don't know. The retailers will have to really know their customers and what they will pay in that respect. But it would be wrong to assume you can pass it all onto a consumer who is still in the middle of an economic recovery as well.
Yeah. Okay. There's been quite a lot of bad press about retail in recent months, whether it's sort of practices or I guess the demise of Debenhams and Arcadia. So, what can we do to counteract this and at the same time championing the independent retailer? Yeah,
I think there's two. I tend to call them narratives, i.e. sort of descriptions of retail. So one is about the demise of retail. So the danger is when you hear about a Debenhams or an Arcadia group going under in the way they have done, and there's others around that. I think Bon Marché would be another one, for instance, and I think Thornton's have announced the closure of all their shops only yesterday. So we are seeing the chains close their shops down, and really, I think chains have suddenly realised that to have national coverage, you don't need 200 stores. You probably need a handful of stores and a very good website to drive through your reach throughout the UK and even Europe. Now, what we're going to be careful of is that the narrative says that the high street is dying because these large companies are changing their focus or failing. The reason Debenhams and Arcadia failed is mainly to do to poor leadership and management decisions through taking on very long leases, selling their properties, leasing back at high rentable values. In the case of Arcadia, not investing anything in their business to move it forwards and just assuming that there'll always be customers coming in to buy clothes. And what we see at the local level, at the independent level, is is a different business model. You know, they're not heavily geared in terms of debt. A lot of independents own their properties and their retail site, and their ambition is not to conquer the world. It's simply to earn a living for themselves and for their employees and service their communities and be the best they can within their community and their marketplace. So that then expansion's not really on our agenda, and this is why I think it's really important to remind local authorities, to remind central government, when they're repurposing town centres, when they're spending billions of pounds on plans to revitalise a high street. It's true what I said. Independents make good high streets. You need that diversity. You need that personality within the high street if people are really going to enjoy, because the habits have changed. We have to accept this. People's habits have changed. The way they find shops, the way they find what they're looking for has changed. Right? And I think independents, funny enough, are better able to adjust their model accordingly. But we have to remind people the high street isn't dead, it's changing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I think we've actually come to the end of our questions.
Brilliant.
So thank you very much. That was really enlightening, really interesting to hear. And thanks to all our attendees
yes, thank you.
for joining the session. Thanks again.